Welcome the anointed ones. Sometimes the scariest prison isn't made of bars, it's built from birthdays, baby photos, but we're family. Welcome to the place where truth doesn't flinch, where illusions get dragged into the light. Because today, we're going all in. Chosen ones. They're panicking. Yes, the same shady family that tried to keep you locked in emotional captivity, spiritual suppression, and psychological servitude. They feel the walls closing in, but not around you, around them. Fact. Studies show that emotionally manipulative families often isolate the strongest member, the truth teller, to keep their dysfunction from collapsing. So if you were the difficult one, the too sensitive one, or the black sheep, congratulations. You were the threat to their illusion. You were never the problem. You were the proof that they couldn't gaslight your soul into submission. Proof that their lies couldn't hold forever. Proof that someone wasn't drinking the generational Kool-Aid, and now that you're slipping out of their control like a tax bill they forgot to pay, they're spiraling, clutching their fake smiles like it's a family heirloom. But guess what? You're not running away. You're walking out, with receipts, with clarity, with silence that screams, "I'm done." So grab your popcorn, because what we're about to break down is not your average family drama. This is spiritual jailbreak. This is ancestral revolution. This is you, uncaged. Let's get into it. Number 1. They didn't want to destroy you. They wanted to own you. They didn't want to destroy you. They wanted to own you. That's the part most people miss. The abuse wasn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it looked like compliments with strings attached. Sometimes it was guilt dressed up as guidance. From the outside, it looked like a family just looking out for you. But behind closed doors, it was a slow, calculated takeover of your identity. Every decision had to be filtered through their expectations. Every win of yours had to be dimmed so it wouldn't make others feel bad. Every boundary you tried to form was seen as disrespect. They didn't want you broken. They wanted you bent into a version of yourself that served them. You were expected to carry their insecurities, protect their secrets, and shrink yourself for their comfort. They wanted access to your mind, your emotions, your loyalty, without ever earning it. They needed you predictable, silent, and unsure of yourself. That way, they could shape you into whatever fit the image they had in their heads. You weren't allowed to have your own truth. If you spoke up, you were accused of being ungrateful. If you pulled away, you were told you were being distant or cold. But the truth is, they weren't panicking because they loved you so much. They were panicking because they couldn't control you anymore. They built a cage using love as the disguise. It was built out of guilt, obligation, and twisted definitions of loyalty. But it was still a cage. And what made it worse is that they never expected you to notice it. They thought you'd live your whole life inside it, asking for permission to breathe, doubting your instincts and calling it normal. But you saw it. You saw the manipulation, the favoritism, the mind games, and you decided to walk. That's why they're panicking, because ownership is only possible when someone doesn't know their worth. And you finally do. That's the real threat, not your anger, not your distance, but your awakening. You're no longer theirs, and they know it. Number 2. They called it love. But it was actually surveillance. They called it love, but it was actually surveillance. The kind of love they gave you came with eyes on everything you did, every word you spoke, and every step you took. They didn't just watch you, they monitored you. Every choice you made was questioned. Every new friend, every hobby, every change in how you dressed or spoke was treated like a red flag. Not because they cared about your well-being, but because they feared losing control over you. Their version of love came with rules, conditions, and invisible chains. If you didn't follow the script, they gave you the cold shoulder, passive-aggressive remarks, or emotional guilt trips dressed as concern. They wanted to know everything, not so they could support you, but so they could find a way to interfere, manipulate, or spin it back to themselves. The moment you started developing your own opinions, setting boundaries, or simply becoming more independent, the surveillance kicked in harder. Suddenly, you were being interrogated about your tone, your plans, your silence. They treated your privacy like a threat, and your growth like betrayal. You were never allowed to have a space they couldn't invade. And if you tried to pull back, they played the "we're just worried" card, even though their worry always sounded like control in disguise. It wasn't love, it was fear. Fear that you'd grow into someone they couldn't manage. Fear that you'd uncover truths they didn't want you to see. Fear that without their grip on you, you might realize how unhealthy their behavior really was. They needed to know everything so they could keep you emotionally small, so they could stay one step ahead and always make you second-guess yourself. What they called love was just a cage with cameras, a constant reminder that you weren't allowed to be fully you without their permission. But now that you're pulling away, now that you've stopped explaining yourself, they feel the panic set in. Because when the cameras go dark, so does their power. And for the first time, they're the ones being left in the unknown. And they don't know how to survive without watching your every move. Number 3, you were their unpaid therapist, scapegoat, and power source. You weren't just the black sheep. You were the unpaid therapist, the emotional dumping ground, and the family scapegoat all rolled into one. They came to you with their problems, their pain, their chaos. But they never came to hear you. You were expected to listen, to comfort, to absorb everything they couldn't face in themselves. And if you ever needed support in return, they either ignored you or made you feel like you were being too dramatic. The moment you expressed your own pain, they either changed the subject or found a way to make it about them. It was never a two-way street. It was a one-way drain, and you were the one being emptied. They treated your compassion like a resource. Your empathy became their emotional crutch. They would unload on you when they were angry, insecure, or falling apart, and then walk away like you were a disposable therapist who didn't need rest, care, or understanding. But the worst part? When things went wrong in the family, when tensions rose or secrets got exposed, you were the one blamed. You became the problem, the instigator, the one causing issues, just for noticing what others were too afraid to admit. You were labeled difficult, not because you were wrong, but because you refused to lie. Your role wasn't to belong. It was to carry the guilt, carry the shame, carry the dysfunction everyone else pretended didn't exist. You were the emotional sponge that kept the whole show running, but they never thanked you for it. They resented you for surviving it, because deep down they knew they needed your strength more than they were willing to admit. And now that you're walking away from that role, they're terrified. Not because they miss you, but because they no longer have someone to pin their dysfunction on. You're not broken. You're just exhausted from being everything they refuse to be for themselves. And the minute you stopped playing that role, the entire house of cards they built started shaking. You were never the weak one. You were just the one holding up too much for too long. And now, you've finally put it all down. Number 4. They panicked because your clarity was their collapse. They panicked because your clarity was their collapse. This isn't just a catchy phrase. It's the harsh reality of what happens when you finally see your family for what they truly are, not who they pretend to be. For years, you were conditioned to view them as your protectors, your guides, your safety net. You believed in their stories, their excuses, and their versions of events, because that's what love and loyalty looked like on the surface. But then something shifted. You stopped accepting the illusions. You saw beyond the roles they played, parent, sibling, elder, and instead you recognized the fractured adults underneath. You saw the insecurities they hid behind sarcasm, the desperation beneath their control, and the unresolved pain fueling their actions. That moment of clarity didn't just change how you saw them, it changed how they saw you. Suddenly, you weren't just a child, a sibling, or a caretaker. You became a mirror reflecting everything they wanted to hide. Your eyes stripped away the masks, and that terrified them, because the truth you uncovered was a threat to their carefully constructed world. If you could see their brokenness, their lies, and their manipulation, then their power over you and the family began to crumble. Your clarity meant you could no longer be easily manipulated or gaslighted. You stopped accepting their narratives without question. You questioned their motives, challenged their authority, and refused to participate in their toxic games. This shook the foundation of their control. When someone who was once under their thumb becomes immune to their tactics, the entire dynamic shifts. And for those who thrive on control, that shift feels like an earthquake. They panic because your awakening exposes their failures and forces them to confront their own dysfunctions, even if only in the moment. Their world is built on control, secrecy, and denial, and your clarity threatens to bring it all crashing down. You became a threat not because you sought to hurt them, but because by simply seeing them clearly, you took away their power to keep you trapped. And that loss terrifies them more than anything else. Number 5. They never expected you to outgrow the cage. They built to keep you small. They never expected you to outgrow the cage they built to keep you small. That cage wasn't made of metal bars or chains. It was invisible, woven from their expectations, rules, and carefully crafted limits. From the very beginning, they decided how far you were allowed to go, what dreams you could chase, and how loud you could be without upsetting the balance they wanted to maintain. Your growth wasn't supposed to be your own. It was supposed to serve their narrative. They handed out praise like a strict teacher handing out gold stars, only when you stayed obedient, quiet, and within the lines they drew. Step outside those lines, and the crumbs stopped. You'd be met with criticism, guilt, or silence. They fed you just enough approval to keep you hoping, but never enough to make you truly confident. They told you that pushing too far was selfish, that your desires were secondary to the family's needs, and that independence was dangerous. This cage was designed to keep you small, unsure, and dependent, someone who wouldn't challenge the status quo or reveal the cracks in their carefully built facade. They counted on you staying trapped there forever, because your escape would mean their control slipping away. But what they didn't count on was your awakening. You started questioning everything. Why certain rules existed, why you felt drained around them, why your dreams seemed to shrink every time you tried to speak up. You began remembering who you were before their gaslighting took hold, the fearless version of yourself who believed in more than just surviving. You remembered the spark inside that wasn't meant to be dimmed by their doubts or fears. That realization was the first crack in the cage. From there, the escape began. You stopped asking for permission. You started setting boundaries. You dared to dream bigger, speak louder, and demand respect. The more you grew, the more the cage seemed to tighten. And that's when panic set in on their side. Because your growth wasn't just personal progress, it was their loss of control, their exposure, their unraveling. They never expected you to outgrow their cage, but you did. And that's why you're running free now, leaving their panic behind. Number 6. You didn't just break free, you broke the pattern they needed to keep you. You didn't just break free, you broke the pattern they needed to keep you. This isn't just about escaping one family's control. It's about interrupting a cycle that has repeated itself for generations, wrapped in silence, shame, and a false sense of loyalty that demanded your compliance. Families like these survive on unspoken rules, rules that teach you to carry burdens quietly, to accept abuse as normal, and to protect secrets at all costs. It's a twisted ritual where everyone plays a role, the victim, the enabler, the abuser, but no one ever breaks the chain. When you chose to step away, you didn't just reject their control over you, you rejected the entire script. You refused to carry the shame they wanted to pass down, the silence they demanded, and the loyalty that was really just submission. That refusal is powerful because it exposes the lie that blood means unconditional loyalty, or that family pain is something to be endured without question. By breaking the pattern, you cracked open a hidden door for yourself, and maybe even for the generations that come after you. This is why you are dangerous in their eyes, not because you are angry or rebellious, but because you hold a mirror to their darkest secrets and refuse to look away. You challenge the very foundation of their family story, the one they built to keep themselves safe and unaccountable. Your freedom threatens to unravel their carefully guarded narrative, exposing truths they desperately want buried. Breaking the pattern means you're no longer a link in the chain. You're a rupture, an interruption in the cycle of trauma and control. That's why they panic. because deep down they know that patterns are only as strong as the ones who continue to enforce them. And by choosing your own path, you've shown that survival doesn't mean repetition. You've turned the inherited pain into power, and that is something they can neither understand nor contain. Number 7. They are not angry because you left. They're angry because you left intact. They aren't angry because you left. They're angry because you left intact. They expected that cage to break you down piece by piece until all that was left was someone small, confused, and easy to control. They counted on you to carry scars invisible to the world but obvious to them, scars that would remind you and everyone else that their control was absolute. But you didn't crumble. You didn't collapse under the weight of their expectations, their manipulations, or their neglect. You left with your spirit unbroken, your soul whole, and your sanity fiercely guarded. That's the real wound for them, the fact that you're not just gone, but you're still you. You didn't limp away with your head down or your voice silenced. You walked out with fire in your eyes, a clarity in your mind, and a strength in your heart they couldn't extinguish. You carry the pieces of yourself they tried to shatter, and that scares them more than any words or actions ever could. They hope to leave you defeated, a cautionary tale for anyone who dared to challenge their power. Instead, you became a living contradiction to their narrative. You are proof that their cage was never as strong as they believed. And that truth is what burns them from the inside out. The rage you see is less about losing you and more about losing the control that defined them for so long. So understand this. Their anger isn't about your departure. It's about your survival. It's about the fact that you're reclaiming parts of yourself they tried to erase, rewriting the story they tried to dictate. You didn't just escape their cage. You shattered it from the inside. And that makes you unstoppable. Number 8. They tried to program you to betray yourself before you ever betrayed them. From the very start, they worked to program you to betray yourself before you ever had a chance to betray them. It wasn't random chaos or just bad family dynamics. It was a deliberate conditioning. They wanted you to doubt every instinct, second-guess every feeling, and silence your own voice before it could challenge theirs. Every time you trusted your gut, they undermined it. Every time you expressed your emotions, you were made to feel wrong or excessive. They trained you to apologize for simply being you, to shrink yourself so their control could expand. This wasn't accidental. It was a strategy. If you learned to betray yourself first, if you abandoned your own truth before anyone else could, you would stay predictable, manageable, and most importantly, silent. They wouldn't have to raise their voices or confront you directly because you'd already been taught to doubt your worth and your reality. Your own internal enemy became their greatest weapon, making sure you never had the confidence or clarity to rebel. But now, something's changed. You've unplugged from that programming. You've started reclaiming your inner voice, listening to the instincts you were told to ignore. You've stopped apologizing for your emotions, your boundaries, your truth. You're learning to trust yourself again, something they never expected. That's why their panic is so intense, because their control depended on your self-betrayal, and now that foundation is crumbling. You're no longer the person they molded through manipulation and conditioning. You're becoming your own person, free from the lies they told you about who you should be. That freedom scares them because it means they've lost the power to silence you without force. You don't just speak now, you speak with the authority of someone who knows their worth, and that breaks the cycle they worked so hard to keep unbroken. Number 9, you were the family mirror, and they couldn't stand their reflection. You were the family mirror, and they couldn't stand their reflection. When you showed up with your light, it wasn't just brightness. It was a harsh spotlight on everything they wanted to hide. Your healing made their wounds obvious. Your peace exposed the chaos they buried under excuses and denial. Instead of looking in that mirror and facing their own brokenness, they lashed out at you, the reflection they didn't want to see. It's easier to attack the mirror than to confront the cracks in the glass. So they blamed you, criticized you, and tried to shatter your spirit, because your growth was a constant reminder of what they refused to fix. Your strength highlighted their weaknesses, your clarity revealed their confusion, and your truth shattered the stories they told themselves to survive. Your escape means they lost their favorite scapegoat, the person they could project their fears, guilt, and shame onto without consequence. When you were trapped inside that cage, they could continue pretending that everything was fine, that their damage wasn't real because you carried it for them. But now that you're free, they can no longer use you as a dumping ground for their decay. You stopped absorbing their toxicity, and that leaves them exposed and vulnerable. This is why they panic, not because you left, but because your departure means the mirror is no longer cracked or dirty. It's clean, reflecting your true self. And that reflection is impossible for them to ignore or escape. You became the proof of what they refused to admit, that their problems aren't just yours, they're theirs too. And now with you gone, they have no choice but to face what's really inside, or keep living in the dark. Number 10. They're not panicking over your absence. They're panicking over your potential. They're not panicking over your absence. They're panicking over your potential. When you walked away, it wasn't just a physical departure. They saw something much bigger slipping through their fingers. It's the haunting question that keeps them awake at night. What if? What if you rise beyond every limitation they ever set? What if you become everything they said you could never be? That fear cuts deeper than anger or resentment because it's personal. It's not about losing you. It's about losing the control over the story they've told themselves for so long. Their entire narrative depended on keeping you small, invisible, and doubting your worth. If you succeed, it shatters that narrative into pieces. Your potential becomes a living contradiction to their lies, exposing the truth they worked so hard to bury. That's not just disappointment. It's dread. Dread that their influence is slipping, that their grip is weakening, and that the future they feared is now inevitable. This fear makes them panic. Not because you left, but because you're no longer the version of you they can predict or manipulate. You're becoming unpredictable in the best way, growing, evolving, and stepping into your power. And that potential threatens everything they thought they controlled. It's a reckoning they never prepared for, and it terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. You aren't just gone, you're a possibility they never saw coming, and that possibility is what truly scares them. Number 11. You were cast as the crazy one because you were the only one awake. You were cast as the crazy one because you were the only one awake. The moment you started questioning the family narrative, pushing back against the lies, and reclaiming your voice, you became a problem they couldn't ignore. Labeling you as unstable, irrational, or overly emotional wasn't about truth. It was a strategy. Crazy became a convenient label to dismiss you, to make everyone else look away from the uncomfortable truths you were exposing. It was their way of controlling the narrative without having to change their behavior or face their own brokenness. They didn't call you crazy because you lost your mind. They called you that because your clarity disrupted the story they were desperately clinging to. You saw their sickness, their denial, and their manipulation, and that scared them. Admitting you were right would mean admitting they were wrong. And that's a reality many aren't ready to face. So instead they weaponize the idea of your instability to protect their fragile egos and keep their control intact. Being labeled crazy was their way of isolating you, making you doubt yourself and forcing you into silence. It was a code word for inconvenient, the inconvenient truth that you were awake while they remained asleep in their own toxic patterns. The label was a smokescreen to hide their own guilt and dysfunction, designed to keep you locked in a cage of doubt and confusion. But here's the truth. Being called crazy in that context was actually a sign of your strength. It meant you were breaking through the family's illusion, refusing to play the part they assigned you. It meant your mind was clear enough to see what others couldn't or wouldn't. And that's why your escape terrifies them. Because you weren't crazy, you were awake, and they know it. Number 12. Their panic is the sound of a system collapsing without its power supply. Their panic is the sound of a system collapsing without its power supply. You didn't just walk away, you unplugged the whole operation. For years, you were the unseen energy running their control grid, the silent force keeping their manipulation alive. Your compliance, your doubts, your silent acceptance, they all fed the system, keeping their power steady and their lies believable. But the moment you left, the lights started flickering, the machine began to glitch. They're scrambling now because the foundation they relied on to hold everything together is crumbling. Without your energy fueling their control, the whole system is breaking down, and that terrifies them more than anything else. They counted on you to be the weakest link, the easy target, someone they could bend and break without consequence. But the truth is, you were the backbone, the vital support holding up the entire structure. Your presence kept the balance in their toxic world. Your doubts were managed, your resistance contained, and your spirit subdued just enough to keep their narrative intact. When you finally unplugged yourself, you didn't just escape. You caused a blackout that exposed every hidden wire and crack in their setup. That's why their panic is so raw. It's not just fear of losing control over you, it's terror at losing control over everything they built on your silence and submission. Your departure echoes through the system, and now they're left in the dark, trying desperately to find another power source to keep their fragile empire alive. You weren't weak, you were essential. And now that you're gone, the whole house is shaking. Number 13. Escaping wasn't just survival. It was rebellion against a bloodline lie. Escaping wasn't just survival. It was rebellion against a bloodline lie. You didn't merely get out alive. You challenged a deep-rooted story that's been repeated for generations, like a sacred truth, the lie that family means unconditional loyalty, even when that loyalty comes at the cost of your very soul. They taught you that suffering quietly is noble, that keeping secrets and swallowing pain is a badge of honor. But you saw through it all and chose something radical instead. Truth. You rejected the idea that enduring harm silently proves your worth or strengthens family bonds. You refused to accept that your pain should be invisible, that your spirit should be sacrificed for a facade of harmony. This wasn't just about leaving toxic people behind. It was about dismantling a dangerous tradition that traps generations in cycles of silence and damage. By walking away, you broke an ancestral spell, the unspoken rule that family ties are more important than your well-being. You refused to be part of a legacy that demands your submission over your freedom. This act of rebellion is powerful because it shifts the entire narrative. It tells future generations that survival isn't about compliance, it's about reclaiming your voice and your power. Your escape is a declaration that love doesn't require sacrifice of self, and loyalty isn't loyalty if it destroys who you are. You became the living proof that bloodline doesn't have to mean bondage. You tore down a lie that tried to chain you and set a new standard, one where your truth and healing come first. That's why your freedom scares them so much. Because it's not just your story changing, it's the story of everyone who came before you and everyone who will come after. Your rebellion is a revolution. Number 14. You didn't escape the cage. You outgrew it, and it cracked under your expansion. You didn't escape the cage. You outgrew it, and it cracked under your expansion. The walls they built weren't just physical or even emotional, they were built from lies, fear, and control designed to keep you small, dependent, and obedient. But you didn't just find a way out. You transformed so much that the cage itself couldn't hold you anymore. It wasn't about them finally letting you go. It was about you moving beyond the limits they tried to impose. Their manipulations depended on you fitting inside their narrow box, playing the role they assigned, and accepting the story they told. But you evolved beyond those boundaries. You expanded in ways they never expected, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Your growth was the pressure that cracked the cage walls, the force that made their control crumble. When you became too big for their lies, too clear for their confusion, the cage broke from within. You're not running away from something anymore. You're evolving out of their reach. That shift changes everything. It means you're no longer reacting to their control or trying to survive their system. You're creating a new reality that they can't touch. You're moving on a different level, where their tactics lose power because you've already transcended them. This isn't just freedom. It's transformation. It's the kind of growth that makes the past irrelevant and the future wide open. The cage wasn't just a trap, it was a challenge. And by outgrowing it, You proved that no cage, no matter how strong, can hold the force of real expansion. Your escape is more than a simple exit. It's a seismic shift that rewrites everything you thought was inevitable. You didn't just break free from a cage built by fear, control, and deception. You shattered the very foundation that tried to keep you small, silent, and powerless. This is your declaration that you will no longer carry the weight of their shadows, their lies, or their expectations. You have stepped into a new realm where your truth cannot be ignored, where your light exposes what was once hidden, and where your growth is unstoppable. The panic you see from those who tried to cage you isn't about losing control. It's about losing the story they needed to survive. But you're no longer a character in their narrative. You're the author of your own destiny, rewriting every line with courage, clarity, and relentless power. This isn't just an escape. It's a revolution within you, a radical reclaiming of your soul and your story. So walk forward knowing that your freedom is a beacon, one that will illuminate the path for others still trapped in shadows. Your breaking of the cage isn't the end. It's the unstoppable beginning of a life lived fiercely, authentically, and unapologetically. The cage cracked because you grew, and your growth will never stop. You are free, powerful, and utterly unbreakable. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join the community where real truths are uncovered and freedom is celebrated. Like this video, if it ignited something inside you, drop a comment below to share your story or thoughts. And don't forget to share this with anyone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep shining light on the things that matter most. Let's grow stronger together.